What's up everyone, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John and it's time for another episode of 7 on Sunday. In fact, it's a very special episode this week because I just bought a megaphone for use in future videos. And I know, I'm patting myself on the back already, a very original idea, and I know that you'll never get sick of me yelling at you like this towards the camera. I wonder what this button does. Oh god, let's make that stop. Evolving over the years and improving as a band and as an individual musician is not an easy task, and so many bands will definitely back that point up. I think it's definitely been shown time and time again that as many bands age, they kind of run out of steam, they lose focus, or maybe they lose sight of what the fans really loved about them in the first place, and they kind of become a joke compared to their original material. When a band can kind of subvert those expectations and continue to grow, evolve, stay true to themselves, but challenge themselves at the same time, that is the cherry on top, my friends. I respect the hell out of those artists, out of those bands, and the 7 that I've selected today came from a pretty small pool because it's not exactly an everyday task when you see a band not improving after every single album, but still always continuing to grow, not always topping themselves, but still they're trying, they're making an honest effort. I'd love to know what you think about my list, so sit back, enjoy the video, and after you've watched it, if there's other bands that you feel you would add, then let me know in the comments section. Up first on the list today are the band BAYSIDE that kinda caught fire in a small way. They had a decent following in the 2000s. Their 2005 self-titled record is really what put them on the map. It's the album that I discovered them through because they had a program on Victory TV on Fuse that came on Sunday mornings when I would skip church. Devotion and Desire is the song that really caught my attention, and I can still to this day go back to the self-titled and say, yes, this really does hold up quite well because I did just that within the past week. Now, about BAYSIDE, they were never bad, so I'm putting them at number 7 because they started off really solid, but somehow they just continued to build muscle mass and get even greater. Anthony Ranieri is an incredible lyricist. The way that he writes his songs and also sings his songs with such conviction definitely does justice to the style of emo punk rock that they play. It doesn't necessarily cater to one specific trend or genre because they kind of avoid those things altogether. I feel that Jack O'Shea, their guitarist, is one of the most underrated guitarists of the 21st century. His solos and just his playing style in general is orgasmic. It's something that I can't take my ears off of. And as BAYSIDE continued to grow with albums like Shudder and even Killing Time, I feel that they balanced out both solid and soft growth with some heavier leaning material. And then came 2014's Cult that really changed the game with some thundering drums, the riffs on that record, and also the kind of almost growled vocals in places that get kind of aggressive. And then they moved on to Vacancy, which was, again, a little bit softer, but they proved that they were still aging like a fine wine, which is absolutely awesome. Definitely check out their single Prayers that dropped in 2019. I think it's one of their best songs to date, and that is crazy to say about a band that's like 2 decades into their career almost. It's crazy to think about, but did anyone really think that the band that released Get Stoked On It for their debut album would turn into one of the most well-liked and well-respected bands in the pop-punk scene? The Wonder Years have continued to exceed expectations for not only myself, but music fans in general. They put out a couple of records early on, Suburbia, even The Greatest Generation, that started to win them a massive following within the scene. But it wasn't just there that they stopped. They continued to write these heartfelt songs that were so tragic and emotional, but at times very, very catchy. And that's something that pushed through. It broke them through to a bigger crowd. It definitely elicits a response from the listener, not only emotionally, but it makes you want to move. You feel every note of their music. They didn't stop with The Greatest Generation, which was kind of a concept album. They pushed forward to No Closer to Heaven, which again took on a concept of losing a friend and made it just so that they wore the heart on the sleeve, but the words coming out, they just hurt like daggers. You felt every single word that Dan Soupy Campbell was singing. The band and the music itself cannot go unnoticed either, because the way that they write, it definitely, even when they were still in the more pop-punk lane, was exceeding so many bands around them. They kind of transcended the genre. They proved that yet again on Sister Cities that released in 2018, and maybe it wasn't their best album to date, but I sure as hell am not going to call it a disappointing or bad release. My number 5 selection comes because obviously people would hold me in contempt of court if I didn't put this on the list, so at number 5, here you have it, Radiohead. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because you probably know the story. They're a band that started off in the kind of grungy movement with Pablo Honey. They weren't that well received, and a lot of their songs like Creep were just called a gimmick. And then they put out The Bends, and people started to take notice of that in 1995. And they're like, okay, maybe Radiohead aren't exactly what we thought they were. Oh my goodness, they blew everyone's minds out of the water as they released OK Computer in 1997. And that album definitely changed the course of history for so many fans and other musicians out there. The record is legendary for a reason, and Radiohead continued to experiment, challenging themselves, going out there, pushing sonic boundaries as they released both Kid A, Amnesiac, and even Hail to the Thief. All of those records definitely challenged their core sound. While remaining true to who Thom Yorke was as a songwriter, I feel that they got smarter, more insightful, they took on darker topics, and the music was just so suspenseful. And then they've continued to put out fantastic records like In Rainbows and the album that actually got me into them, A Moon-Shaped Pool. Number 4, The Maine. The Maine are one of those bands that I feel some people will overlook and maybe even dismiss unfairly because they're associated with the Warped Tour scene. And I can understand that one might have negative feelings towards Warped Tour and all of those bands and fans, but writing the Maine off, that's not something that you should do. The Maine were never bad per se. They're one of those bands that just were a product of their time at first. It's excusable. They were in the MySpace era. Of course, they were younger, so some of the songs are going to be more immature on Can't Stop, Won't Stop, and even Black and White. But then they started to get more tight-knit. They were close as a brotherhood, the way that they wrote songs. And they started to fully realize that John O'Callaghan was a very, very special frontman. And then Pat, Jared, the rest of the members of the Maine were really coming into their own. They showed those signs of life on Pioneer first in 2011, and then again on Forever Halloween in 2013, which traded out some of the more silly and lighthearted moments for, yes, windows down type music, but also some things that would just strike you and stir you down to your core. Up to that point in time, I liked the Maine, but oh my god, American Candy came out, and that is a perfect record. You cannot convince me otherwise. American Candy and even Lovely Little Lonely that released in 2017 are two albums that showed that the Maine could fly so close to the sun over and over again, but they still weren't melting their wings somehow? So what if their 2019 release You Are Okay isn't their best album to date? This is a band that clearly cares so very much about the way that they write and record music. This is the Maine, writing these songs from the heart in the studio. They're not getting the love that they deserve or the appreciation like many of the bands on this list, so please go check them out if you never have before. Grabbing the number 3 position today is Car Seat Headrest, originally the solo project and the lo-fi recordings of musician Will Toledo. Will Toledo was, get this, recording songs in the back of his car, so hence the name Car Seat Headrest. Toledo literally released a dozen albums unsigned before he finally got a deal with Matador Records. His first release for them was Teens of Style in 2015, and that album saw him re-record with a full backing band for the first time, some of the early cuts that fans had loved and adored so much, and I heard that and I was instantly mesmerized and won over. Clearly he had a knack for insightful songwriting, but also jubilant sections of music where they would really take off in a direction where I didn't exactly see coming, but I loved it. And then Teens of Denial came out in 2016. That was the game changer. That was the riveting release that I can't stop coming back to. That's one of those albums that just has so many songs that are easy to listen to on their own, but also in the context of the album. Toledo and the band decided to take to task re-recording the album Twin Fantasy, this time calling it Twin Fantasy Face to Face, and the updated version is magnificent. It's not quite as great as Teens of Denial in my opinion, but it's showing that Toledo and company are leading a charge in the indie rock movement movement. I can't wait to see what their next move is. I'm sure that many of you watching this are fans of at least a few songs, but I challenge you to go out and listen to some of the full-length albums to see the growth, because I truly wasn't into a lot of the lo-fi stuff early on, but the growth, the evolution that they've seen is uncanny. Number 2, Brand New. This is a band that continued to carry a torch between each and every album. They set the bar higher and higher as to what they could do, as to how they could keep you guessing, but also continue to evolve in a way that made sense for them. They started off in 2001 with their album called Your Favorite Weapon, which is by no means a bad album. It was more of a pop-punk affair. In fact, it's one of my favorite pop-punk albums of all time. The songwriting from Jesse Lacey was still fantastic, but it wasn't until 2004's Deja and Tendu that they changed the fucking game. This is where they started to influence an entire generation of musicians and future bands that wanted to play music in a similar vein. The lyrics are unparalleled on that album, and honestly, Lacey's writing style only got sharper, more bleak and poetic as the years went by. If you thought Deja and Tendu was impressive, then buckle the fuck up, for The Devil and God are raging inside me. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime magnum opus albums that defines a generation in some ways, despite the fact that not everyone knows it. If you do listen to this album, it's hard not to get something from it. It has this haunting feeling that lingers with you, and these unmistakable lyrics, and also guitars from Vincent Accardi. The band really stepped up musically, and this showed once again on 2009's album Daisy. I think this is an album that goes underrated and slept on by some fans. It did get more of a mixed reception, but for me personally, it saw them quite literally pouring gasoline and stoking the fire. After that, there were 8 years in between albums before again challenging for another magnum opus moment with Science Fiction in 2017. Their final album is again one of their greatest. This is a reflective album. It's very wise in the way that it continues this message, this narrative throughout, almost like a bad dream, except it's life and we have to deal with it. Brand New's lyrics never got stale, they never fell off in the slightest, and they always reinvented but also remained true to their sound, which is exactly why they're on this list. Attention, Hayley Williams, would you please report to the ARTV video? You're needed for a thumbnail and for a title. Oh, there you are. You're right there. Paramore cracked their knuckles and landed atop the list of bands that continued to challenge and evolve and improve their sound over the years. Unpopular opinion, crucify me if you must, but Paramore's early stuff wasn't exactly fantastic. In fact, I find All We Know Is Falling and Riot to be their two weakest albums. That's coming from someone who loves the ever-living fuck out of Paramore. But still, I think they continued to improve. They got better and better. Maybe they weren't as hard or as heavy, but the lyrics are, without a doubt, so much better. It's so clear to me when you listen to Brand New Eyes versus Riot that Hayley Williams and Taylor York, being a full-time member at that point, was really assisting, really driving the sound forward. I think the internal conflict that was going on within Paramore definitely made that an even better listen and an even better record for whatever reason. It's an album that came out a decade ago, but still, it doesn't sound dated in any way. They moved on to the self-titled album in 2013 after some more lineup changes, and it was unfortunate, but still, even as a technical trio, Jeremy Davis, Taylor York, and Hayley Williams at that time, they made an over an hour-long album that nobody saw coming, and it was better than it had any right to be. I think it shut up a lot of people, a lot of critics and naysayers that were just like, oh, Paramore is this gimmicky pop-punk band, and then they put out this record with songs like Future on it, and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna zip it now. Fast forward again through some more member changes and Paramore almost possibly retiring, and then After Laughter came out. Zach Farrow, the drummer, rejoined the band. Hayley Williams and Taylor York were finding life and inspiration once again, and they went in more of a pop direction. Oh no, what are we gonna do? Well, here's the difference between Paramore going pop and reinventing their style and all of the other bands that are out there doing it. As Taylor York commented on in an interview, he couldn't imagine himself or Hayley going up there and singing someone else's song. I respect and admire that so much, you have no idea. They don't want the outside co-writers. They're making their own music. That's why when they went pop, it actually sounded good because it came from the heart and it was a natural evolution, a new peak for them. What did you think of my list of bands that have continuously showed signs of improvement throughout their career? Let me know in the comments section down below, and if there's anything that you would like to add to the list or maybe have me consider for part 2, then definitely drop a comment. Don't forget to like this video while you're here and subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when I upload future videos like this. If you need to catch up on more episodes of 7 on Sunday, then tap this playlist link right here, or tap here for another video that I made recently on the channel. All of my social media accounts, including my Instagram at ARTVJohn and my Patreon, are linked down below if you want to help support the channel over there. Other than that, I appreciate you and I'll see you soon for more right here on ARTV.